All right, hello, good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here. You've just had some lightning Q&A, and for these entrepreneurs, they had about a minute to answer. I can tell you for researchers, to have to do a 15-minute research presentation is lightning round for us. So with that, let me begin. It's a crucial time for the transition to electric vehicles. And with the forward momentum has come a lot of increased attention to some emergent problems that many fear could limit or constrain diffusion. My main message today is that there are also some new paths to solving some of those problems, really a swarm of innovations in all aspects of this transition, and let me plunge into the story I want to tell. To step back just for a moment to context, this is a quote from Toyota CEO Akio Toyoda saying we're in the midst of a once-in-a-century transformation in mobility, the way that people and things move around, and based really on four disruptive technologies, business model changes in some cases, electrification, connectivity, autonomy, and shared mobility services. The program on mobility, vehicle and mobility innovations that I direct at the Mack Institute is putting all of our energy, both at Penn, Wharton, and in our international research network, at understanding these case technologies, both separately and as they interact. But since this is a lightning round, today I'm just going to talk about electric vehicles. Certainly, major barriers to the diffusion of EVs remain. If the goal is cost and performance parity with legacy internal combustion engine technology, some of the barriers to be overcome are the need for battery innovations affecting cost and range and the supply chain, the access to charging infrastructure, and affordability. And I have to say, as somebody who's been studying this area for a long time, these barriers look different than they did even 2 or 3 years ago. I think one important thing is the questions are not so much whether this will happen, chicken and egg problems. It's more about when and how. The expanding EV supply and the growing EV demand, coming from several different factors converging, is creating this swarm of innovations, as I said. And some of these are highly visible, some are more behind the scenes, some are private sector, some are public sector. I'm going to cover a subset of those. This is the full set of things I'm keeping an eye on with respect to batteries, charging, and affordability. But today I'm just going to talk, and again, briefly about batteries and charging. So to start off with some attention to battery innovations. Certainly one of the main things that you may read about and hear are supply chain concerns with respect to the raw materials that go into batteries. All of the battery electric vehicles at the moment use lithium-ion as a basis. The other, you'll get used to my terminology here in a moment, most used chemistry involves nickel, manganese, and cobalt, and graphite for anodes. And each of these has some potential supply chain issue. Cobalt is scarce. It's concentrated with over half coming from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's a set of both environmental and human rights concerns surrounding that mining. Nickel, scarce and concentrated in a small number of countries. Some of the new formulations are using more nickel, driving up that demand. Graphite, not scarce, but concentrated heavily in China. Lithium, not scarce, but the supply not adequately mined to the demand that is coming. And we've already seen dramatic price spikes related to that. There's also some concerns, environmental concerns about mining. I'm going to come back to the supply chain issues in a moment, but first I want you to understand some physical and software innovations in batteries that are changing the impact of these shortages. There's some new chemistries coming along. Again, you'll understand these acronyms in a moment. You'll be surprised at how much new things you know about battery chemistry. From NMC to LFP. Looking beyond the cells, these are the things that look an awful lot like the AA and AAA batteries that you put into your personal devices. But thousands of those are put into battery packs, into modules, and then into vehicles. Software is a big part of making these systems work. And we're seeing that something that's being increasingly vertically integrated by automakers. And there's some packaging innovations. So I'll explain each of these as I go. First of all, because of the shortages of nickel and the worries about cobalt, there's a search on for alternative battery chemistries, and it's already showing considerable progress, I would say. So first of all, with the nickel, manganese, cobalt, there's already variants that use less cobalt. They happen to use more nickel. But more significant, and what I'll pay a little more attention to, is the so-called LFP for lithium iron ferro phosphate. That is the emerging and fast-growing alternative battery chemistry, which doesn't use nickel or cobalt at all. So this is a rather important development. Those are the cells in succession that have gone into Tesla vehicles. Panasonic is their partner. The 4680 is just rolling out recently, offers a lot of advantages. But beyond cells, which are generally manufactured by battery specialists, Tesla makes their own, there's a lot of action happening with the modules and battery packs. I talked a little earlier today, if you were in the supply chain session, about the trends towards vertical integration. All the automakers are vertically integrating into these aspects of battery manufacturing. They're making the modules and the packs in their own factories. If you've heard concerns about the number of jobs that may be lost because employment will flow out to battery makers, actually a lot of the jobs are staying in the auto industry because they have vertically integrated these activities. The software, which is not the natural capability of the automakers, they're building software capability fast, of course for autonomy and connectivity and services, but also to manage battery electric vehicles better. The battery management software, sometimes called the DNA of EVs, is important in a bunch of ways. It monitors everything that's going on with the cells. It controls charging and discharging. It regulates safety and efficiency. And so really for the automakers wanting to learn how to do battery electric vehicles, they've got to understand the software as well as the hardware. One of the innovations in packaging is to eliminate some of those intermediate packaging steps. BYD is particularly known for a so-called cell-to-pack design, which eliminates modules. That reduces weight. Reducing weight is good because as batteries get bigger and heavier, there's more weight to propel, which requires more battery capacity. You can get into a weight spiral that goes up, or you can get into a weight spiral that goes down. Cell-to-chassis is the newest interesting packaging innovation, and Tesla is doing this. They talk about an analogy to airplane wings. I don't know if you know that the fuel tanks for airplanes are in the wings. The first step in making that work was to design the fuel tanks in the shape of wings. What you do analogously for an electric vehicle is you design a part of the chassis to hold the cells, and you put the cells right into the physical structure that is the vehicle. Again, a great reduction in weight. It has another benefit, increasing something called power density. That's going to bring me back to chemistry. So remember LFP, that chemistry which eliminates nickel and cobalt. A little bit of background, it was initially used in lower power vehicles like scooters and golf carts, but as that has advanced and as it's been more appealing in comparison to NMC, Tesla, for example, is using it in their Chinese-made Model 3s. It's coming soon to the US-made Model 3s. Ford and Volkswagen have already announced their intention to have certain models using LFP completely. These are completely plentiful materials. It also, there's no fire ever reported in the use of LFP batteries. It allows more recharging cycles. It does not have as much energy density. So for that, any other changes you can make that improve energy density, like cell-to-chassis or like really smart software, which uses the capacity of the system better, is going to make it possible to use this battery chemistry. So all of these things kind of come together to allow some promising ways of working around, in this case, perhaps too much dependence on nickel and cobalt. I'm not going to promise you or say that we have any way to see clear to solving all of the shortages with raw materials, but another thing that I want to point out is that shortages drive economic forces that can expand supply, that can allow substitutions, and that can encourage recycling. So lithium is not scarce, but the amount of lithium being mined presently is not nearly enough for the anticipated demand. Mining is one form of getting a hold of lithium, but you can also extract from brine. You can do it through evaporation, or there's other more direct methods. Those methods have less environmental impact. There's just a massive amount of investment going into lithium right now, which is finding new sources and testing new extraction techniques. These new chemistries don't use the scarce materials as much. And then, of course, as the raw materials become pricey, or if you're worried about shortages, if you can recycle to bring the existing batteries back into the supply chain, there's a great benefit in that. And for a bunch of these reasons, one of the most surprising headlines I've seen in just the recent couple of months is that cobalt, which was until very recently seen as in dire risk of shortage, is now, the headline from The Economist is now super abundant. Its price had gone up to $82,000 a ton. It's dropped now close to historic lows. What's going on? Well, you've got reduced demand for the cobalt in batteries for consumer electronics post-COVID. You've got the new battery chemistries that don't use cobalt. You've got new sources of cobalt that have been found in Indonesia. Production is up in the Congo. Cobalt mining is tied to nickel mining and copper mining, and so that's keeping mines open through volatile cycles that in the past has seen mines open and close. And the batteries are just lasting longer. So recycling is another area where investment is increasing dramatically. And obviously, the more recycling you get, the less dependence on new mining. I couldn't resist this headline from just last week in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you can see it there. Electric vehicles are shattering the barriers to adoption that could matter most. The focus is on cost. There's an emphasis on economies of scale, but I've highlighted the quote that relates to my theme here, which I've been talking about for a while. Just as important is the gradual and often overlooked accretion of countless technological improvements to the battery manufacturing process over the past decade. So I'm here to suggest that that sort of swarm of innovations is likely to continue for batteries, and we'll see a lot of, perhaps, again, surprising progress. With the very short amount of time I have left, I'm going to at least speak briefly to charging innovations. Charging infrastructure, as demand increases now, becomes a front burner focus, and this, of course, plays out in a couple of different arenas. At home, a lot of charging will happen at home and can happen overnight, and the homeowner or the landlord will install the chargers. It doesn't have to be rapid charging. That's one scenario, and it can tie also to a home grid system. Around town, businesses and local governments are going to be investing in charging infrastructure, and that's for daytime charging. It may not involve full topping up, but just adding some small amount to get through the day. It's not necessarily going to be always filled to the batteries do well with not being fully recharged. And then, of course, highways, likely to be more the responsibility of national, federal governments to do. These will usually be investing in superchargers to shorten the amount of time that's necessary, essential for dealing with range anxiety. So a couple of innovations that are related to recharging and to grid policy. One is, how do you get the right economic incentives to charge at the best time for the grid and also so the consumer gets the best price? Well, there's a problem. You actually have to separate out the electricity going to the EV battery recharging from the rest of what's going on in the home charging scenario, for example, or even in the business. This is called load disaggregation, and we've got some collaborations going on between, in this case, GM and Con Edison to have smart meters that easily do the load disaggregation and allow you to apply the right kinds of economic incentives. What about the revenue model for charging? Well, Tesla at their Investor Day just a couple of weeks ago announced a $30 a month flat fee for unlimited overnight home charging. They're doing this in Texas, which has a lot of wind-powered cheap electricity, and they want to direct people towards what you might notice is interesting. Mobile phone use, we used to pay per call, and then it switched over to unlimited for a flat fee. We may be headed that way with EV charging as well. When should charging happen? Well, there's been a lot of attention to overnight would be best because that's when it can be cheapest. Some Stanford researchers are saying not so fast. In California, the cheapest prices for electricity come in the late morning and early afternoon when wind and solar are at their peak. If you want to keep that till the evening, you've got to store it. Storage is inefficient. So let's incentivize daytime use in California. The fine-tuning of these economic incentives to do the charging across those three domains is another area where there's just innumerable small changes going on. Ideas and politics will matter. I think home charging can become part of what we know is a very popular idea, which is have a home grid, have a home energy system. You can be self-sufficient in the case of a power outage. You can charge your car from your home grid. You can charge your house if the power's out from your car. And generally linking electrification to other things that people care about, visible cost savings, but also jobs for installing this infrastructure, will help build political support, which in general will help facilitate diffusion. There's a concern about jurisdictional disputes to get all these changes made. And I just want to say I found this one example as I was searching, like who's trying to cut through the red tape here. California, believe it or not, very much against type, has a new law, AB 205. Look at the things in bold there. If you are trying to build any of those things, a photovoltaic solar facility, a wind facility, a storage system, a transmission line, or if you're manufacturing any of that, you can get a certificate that operates in lieu of any permit, certificate, or similar document required by any state, local, or regional agency. I was really, frankly, stunned. If California can do it, there's hope for the rest of the US and maybe other parts of the world that have complicated jurisdiction rules. That's it for me. Thank you very much.